Our modern idea of retirement is actually less than 100 years old. It was back in 1935 that Franklin D. Roosevelt started the Social Security program. And how that basically works is that it collects money from all citizens, and then when you retire, you get that money back. We call that your entitlements. The word entitlement has kind of gotten a negative stigma because when most people use it, they mean the false perception of entitlement. But when I say that these are your entitlements, I mean it's your money. So whenever politicians talk about the Social Security program, just keep in mind that this is your money they're talking about. And politicians have been talking a lot about it because the way it's currently set up and the way it'll be working in the future is just uncertain. We don't really know how well this is going to work out. And it really seems to be the case that if we don't make some pretty drastic changes pretty soon to the fundamentals of how our Social Security program works, it's not going to be around much longer. But it is very important to have the Social Security program because we've done tests to see if people will be fine without it. And basically what we found is they won't. Most people simply don't save enough money. Even if they try to save enough money, even if they plan ahead to save that money, people just tend to not be able to do so. So Social Security is definitely something that helps everybody out. It's fundamental for the survival of elders in their late life. But nowadays, people aren't retiring as much as they used to. The number of people over the age of 65 in the workforce has risen pretty dramatically. It's risen about 20% in recent years. And prior to our recent, economic problems that we've been having, this was consistently decreasing. So elders are entering our workforce nowadays at a pretty alarmingly high rates as a result. And those who actually do go into retirement, they're probably still going to be in the workforce too in one form or another. Because retiring doesn't necessarily mean you just stop working and you go home. For some individuals, it's much more of a blurred transition where they're just working less, and over time they work even less, and eventually they get to a point where they're not going into work at all. But yeah, some people have a much more crisp transition where they're working full time and then they retire and then that's it. But that's not very common. Only about less than 50% of men fit that crisp pattern. And many men who do retire, they still are working in some regard, holding like a bridge job and just trying to stay active. It's important for elders to stay active in order to feel useful, in order to feel a sense of, meaningfulness in their lives. But the people who do go into retirement, generally they do it because they want to. That's the good news. Today more people retire by choice than any other reason. And most of them, the reason why they decide to retire is because they feel like they can. They feel financially secure. And they don't really want to stay involved in the workplace anymore, and they think they'll be just fine. But other people, they might have to retire a bit early, even if they don't feel financially secure, if they have, health problems that could interfere with their work. And unfortunately, because of these economic problems, these trends are starting to shift. Currently, more people are retiring by choice, but in the future, that might not be the case. A lot of people are being forced into retirement early against their wishes. And when it comes to the issue of gender and retirement, what we typically see is that women don't have it as well as men do. Women typically have entered the workforce later. They usually have more interruptions in their work history. And as a result of this, they typically have less retirement income as a result. And women another consequence of this is women also tend to spend less time planning for retirement and are likelier to continue working part-time after retiring. But the traditional idea of, woman's work, being a homemaker, taking care of children, taking care of the house, these kinds of jobs, which are definitely full-time jobs, these jobs, the concept of retirement doesn't even apply. It makes no sense. I mean, what is she going to do? Stop taking care of the house and the family? It just doesn't make any sense. So in a manner of speaking, being a homemaker is a full-time job that you never get to quit. You're going to be doing that job for the rest of your life, basically. Now, that's the gender differences in retirement. There's also some interesting ethnic differences. But we've only found very little. We've only started doing this kind of research. But one of the interesting things that we have found is that African Americans are more likely to continue working into old age. So they're less likely to go into retirement. Now, people who do choose to go into retirement or are pushed into retirement for one reason or another, they will have to adapt. They need to adjust to this new way of life. And that adjustment can be improved if they have a high sense of personal control, if they have a lot of internal motivation, like if they have things that they want to accomplish in their retirement years, if they have a good physical health, if they feel financially secure, if they feel like they have a lot of social support, and just how they view retirement. Like if they view retirement as transitioning into a new phase of their life, then that can be a very positive thing. But if they view it more so as the end of some meaningful part of their life, then obviously that's going to be harder to adjust to. Another really important factor is that decision to go into retirement needs to be voluntary. If the elder is somehow coerced or pushed into it, then it's going to make things much more difficult. And along those lines, it's very important. This is the third thing that can improve adjustment. It's very important along those lines that the spouse does not get involved when it comes to this decision. I mean, obviously, the individual can talk to their spouse and ask what the spouse wants, but the spouse needs to be careful not to, coerce in any way or influence in any way. Just give an honest opinion. Now, women typically don't have much difficulty with these kinds of adjustments. But men who hold more traditional, like gender role stereotypes, these men typically find themselves lost. Now that their work life is over, they don't really know what to do with their time. They just kind of putter around the house and they act sad. I'm not trying to be flippant. I'm just saying if the man can't adapt to home life, if he can't do those more non-traditional, like gender role chores and stuff like that, if he can't do those kinds of things, then he'll find nothing for him at home, which is where he's going to be spending his years. So it's very important for men to embrace, non-traditional gender roles. But some men, for this very reason, they don't want to retire. They will continue working. They will try hard to stay involved in the workforce in some regard. And this is something that we've seen become quite popular lately. The number of adults over the age of 65 in the labor force has increased dramatically. The most rapid increase, however, though, has been for women. We've seen women getting involved in the workforce for the kinds of reasons I've previously mentioned. They just don't have as much capability of retiring as men do. They don't have as much savings as men do. But whether we're talking about men or women who are working in these elder years, typically these older workers, they're more reliable, they're more loyal, and they're more concerned about safety in the workplace. They want to make sure that everybody in that workplace is going to be having, a good time and is not in any danger. But obviously there are some downsides to having elders in the workforce. They tend to have a lot of those chronic health conditions I've mentioned in a previous video, and that could interfere with their performance. And as a result of this, a lot of employers are trying to find ways to get rid of their older employees. They don't want to have to deal with employees who might have these kinds of health conditions. So ageism is still a fairly widespread issue. But elders want to feel useful. That's a very important aspect to being in old age, is you want to feel like you're part of something. You want to feel like you're making a difference. Everybody wants to feel important. So what a lot of elders do who have moved into retirement is they'll actually spend their time working as a volunteer. And there's three main reasons why they might decide to do this. Maybe they want to explore a new aspect of their life, develop some new skills, perhaps. Maybe they want to just find a sense of purpose, a personal kind of motivation, intrinsic motivation. And then another common reason why they get involved in volunteer work is they just have this desire to share their skills and knowledge with other people. By the time they've reached this point in their life, they probably have developed an expertise in at least a few areas, and it would be a shame to not share that knowledge and those skills. So because of this big, interest in volunteer work, we actually have national organizations to help retirees get involved in various volunteer work, like the American Association of Retired Persons, that's AARP. And being a volunteer, it doesn't just benefit them for the reasons I previously mentioned, but obviously it also helps out other people. And they get a lot of satisfaction from that, by improving the community, by staying socially involved, by staying active. These elders are just getting a lot more satisfaction out of their late life years, and it does a lot of good for their health and well-being.